Hey everyone, and welcome to another Sasquatch Theory podcast. On this episode, we have John from North Carolina, and he's had several Bigfoot encounters and many experiences ranging from New York all the way down into the Carolinas. John was hunting in the Hudson Gorge wilderness when he encountered a jet black figure that he believes to be Sasquatch. John has found tree structures in the forest, and he has experienced large creatures charging through the woods after using his game calls. John has also had Bigfoot encounters and experiences in the Oceanee National Forest in Georgia, and there's no doubt in my mind that these creatures are not in the area. I've been there before, and it's very vast. The mountains are huge, and in Blue Ridge, Georgia, is where the Sasquatch Expedition Bigfoot Museum is located at. Have you had a Bigfoot eye sighting encounter before? If so, please get in touch with me at sasquatchtheory@outlook.com, and I would certainly like to hear about it. But with all that being said, let's dive straight into John's Bigfoot encounters from the East Coast. All right, John, welcome to Sasquatch Theory. How are you doing today?
Doing good, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. John, if you would, tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and your Bigfoot experiences from the very beginning, please.
Yeah, so I'm from upstate New York originally. It's where I was born and raised. Actually was born in, or I was raised in Schenectady, New York, but my grandparents lived on a dairy farm out in East Godak, New York, which is not too horribly far from the Massachusetts-New York border. So I grew up hunting and fishing, like a lot of young guys up there. Been doing that my entire life. So my first encounter actually happened when I was really young, probably, 6 or 7 years old. One of my earliest childhood memories. My grandfather had a pile of 57 crushed stone, and I was playing on it with my cousin. And there was about a 20-foot bank to the left of it that went down to some railroad tracks, and the back side of those railroad tracks were just woods for a long ways. And I remember playing, and then I looked up kind of down the bank, and there was I don't know how else to explain it, a very, very large, completely black figure standing about 10, 15 feet from me and my cousin and just looking. And I don't remember a whole lot of details. This was 31 years ago, 32 years ago. So I don't remember a ton of details. I don't even remember a face. That was one of the things that always haunted me growing up. As I would try and recall it, I couldn't remember a face, just a jet black figure. Everything was black. And I stared at it for maybe 2 or 3 seconds. And then the next memory I have is the wind hitting my face as I was running back up to the house to tell my mother. We were over at my grandparents visiting. And I told my mom, and I remember my mom just saying, "Oh, it's probably just one of your uncles playing a trick on you." But my uncles actually didn't live at home at the time. So I really don't know. Really don't know who that was or what that was. But that was the first first experience that kind of set the tone.
Absolutely. And before we move on, how big was this creature? Do you remember that?
So I remember it towered over me, and it was standing on about a 35-degree incline hill, and it was about 10 foot, and it was over me still. So this was a very large. Now, granted, I was really young, so everything kind of looked big, but it was big. I was looking up at it still. So this was a very large individual. So if it was one of my uncles, he was wearing stilts.
Yeah, that's terrifying. And about how far away was the creature?
Probably about 15 feet, 10 feet. It was very close, extremely close.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is close. And I can see why you took off running.
Yeah, I didn't sit there and try and figure out really what it was. I seen that it was a big black, at the time I thought it was a man. And then I took off running, and that was that.
Did it seem like it was facing you or facing away?
So I think it was facing me. Like I said, I can't remember facial features, but I feel like it was facing me. Um, I've never asked my cousin about this. I need to call her at some point as just, trying to break the ice with someone about this. Like, hey, you remember seeing a Bigfoot when you were 6? It's kind of a weird question, but I do need to call her. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And did you recall anything strange during that encounter, like an odd smell, or did you hear something before you saw it?
I did not. I don't remember a smell. I don't remember anything wrong until I just looked up and this thing was just standing there. Come to find out, throughout the years, my uncles who have lived and hunted there my whole life have heard and seen some really strange things. Now, they have not accepted the fact that there's anything other than us in the woods. So they always play it off as something else, whatever. But they've told me about weird sounds they've heard. And my one uncle claims he saw something running through a field. And my other uncle said, you were drinking too much. And it's like, well, guys, every time you drink, do you see a Sasquatch? No. So that argument doesn't hold a lot of water. But yeah, so there is a history other than just what happened to me in that area for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you recall the time of year? Like, was it summertime or wintertime?
It was summer. Yeah, it would have been summer.
Okay.
Yeah, because we were over actually having a family get together, and we always did that in the summer.
Yeah, and you said this was in New York. Is that correct?
Yes, this was in upstate New York, about 2 hours north of New York City,
Okay.
straight up the Hudson River.
So it's pretty deep woods there, correct?
Yes, yeah, it's mostly farmland in that area, but you're not far from. I'm sure you've heard of the Bennington Triangle. The whole Vermont, that area. You're not far from there. You could walk through the woods eventually to get to that area.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So what other experiences unfolded after this encounter?
Yeah, so don't really remember anything through my early childhood other than that. So I started bow hunting when I was 14. So full time, kind of out on my own. That was when I first got my hunting license. And I had a strange encounter. It was October. I was 14, my first year. And I noticed behind this tree, there was this large, hairy mass, and I couldn't figure out what it was. I was looking through a really cheap pair of binoculars that my parents gave me for Christmas or something. And I couldn't make out what it was, about 60 yards from me. And I put my binoculars down and I looked back up, and the hairy mass that was half behind a tree is gone. And all of a sudden, there's a maple tree in front of me because I'm sitting up in a tree stand, sitting up in front of me. And the whole tree shakes like something hit it with a truck. Completely, no wind that day. Completely calm. Just the strangest thing, like the tree decided to have a temper tantrum, like randomly. And just shook violently for no particular reason. But the strangest thing about that whole, little episode was I never heard anything. I never seen anything. The tree was literally moving basically on its own, or what I thought. It's not like anything ran up to it and hit it and ran away. It was the strangest. It's what's still to this day one of the strangest things that I've ever seen was that tree just start shaking violently. Now, this wasn't a big tree to where there could have been a bear up in it or some sort of animal up in the top that was shaking it. It was a relatively small tree, probably only, I'm guessing 12 to 15 feet tall. It was a maple. The leaves were orange that time of year, late October. So it still had all the leaves on it, but they were changing. But because the leaves were starting to die, they were really loud when you shook the tree. And I remember that. And the tree, like I said, just shook really hard, like a tree hit it, or like a truck hit it, and then nothing. So that was a strange little episode. I don't know. I'm not going to say that was a Bigfoot. I have no idea, but it was just weird.
Yeah. Did it seem like there was something invisible there shaking the tree? I'm not saying there was, but Is that kind of the impression you got? Because a tree
That
that
was the
small,
impression I got.
yeah, like it
Yeah.
wasn't big enough for like a Sasquatch to hide behind it, and you could see all up and down the tree, and you noticed there wasn't a bear there.
Right. There wasn't anything there. The tree just started shaking for just a second or two. It wasn't long. It wasn't like something was grabbing it and shaking it. It was more like something hit it. Like it was running and like if a truck was driving through the woods and bumped into it. That's what it was. It was more like that.
Yeah,
But
so
nothing happens afterwards.
absolutely. So it was too violent for it to be just like a fox squirrel in a tree. Like it
Yes.
was
Yeah. This was not
violently.
a squirrel.
Yeah. Okay. I've
Yeah. This
seen
was not a
videos.
squirrel. It was not a raccoon.
I've seen examples like that on YouTube where these trees are just shaking violently in the woods, and people claim it's Sasquatch, and I believe it is.
Yeah. Like I said, I don't know exactly what that was. At the time, I'm only 14. I really don't have a frame of reference. Sasquatch is not on my brain yet. I really had no interest in the subject at that point in my life. When I hit about 16, is probably when I probably first seen my kind of Sasquatch stuff on the Travel Channel. And I remember on the Travel Channel they used to play all that kind of stuff. I'm 38, so I'm a millennial, but I kind of got a bit of an interest in it. Not a real hard interest, but just like this is kind of cool. Um, so my next encounters really came in Georgia. So when I was 18, my wife and I were married, high school sweethearts, still married to this day, 20 years. And we moved to Georgia, got out of New York, and moved down south. My uncles at the time, who used to live in New York, all lived down south, and these were my hunting buddies. These were the guys I grew up hunting with, and that's where the next kind of encounters happened. So the first thing that happened that was extremely strange, and I talked about this in my email that I had sent you, was my uncle and I were hunting on a place called Oconee WMA, which is wildlife management area, and it's old Native American land. There's actually what they call a rock hawk on it. And it's a giant rock formation that's shaped like an eagle. They call it an eagle, or a hawk. So definitely heavy Native American presence there. And I was hunting on the top of a hill, probably about 50 yards, 150 feet or so, tall to the bottom. And I'm watching the bottom. It's rifle season, so it would have been mid-November. This was about 2010, 2011, something around there. So like I said, in late November. And right at dark, I see what I thought was my uncle coming out of the planted pines. Now here in the South, when they cut the pines and they replant them, they get really, really thick. The loblollies grow up. They grow, they just turn into a thicket. And I thought my uncle walked out of it, out into the bottom, which was really strange. Now this is right at dark, so it's getting to the point where I really can't see a lot of details, but I can make out shapes. And he walks, well, I thought it was he walks down in front of me at about 80 yards, and I'm watching him, and I whistle to try and get his attention because I thought it was my uncle. And it stops. He just stops and gets behind a tree. And that was that. He never came back out. I shined a flashlight down there. I whistled a few more times. Started getting kind of really nervous, like, hey, is he okay? Did something happen? So I kind of gathered my things real quick, and I stood up, and I started walking down the hill, and I heard a branch break behind me, and I looked behind me, and here's my uncle walking from the exact opposite direction with his flashlight. So I looked back down the hill. I don't know what that is down there, but I wasn't about to go find out. So I just turned around and left with him. Never mentioned a word of it to him. We just walked out. So that was definitely a strange happening. Now, could it have been a guy? Maybe. I didn't notice that it was entirely overly man size, but it was very strange in where he came walking out. Like I said, he came walking out of planted pines that you couldn't drive a truck into. It would stop a truck. Right at dark with no orange and no light on Georgia public land during rifle season.
Yeah, that is
You know,
unusual.
it's just not normal.
No, that's not normal at all. And there's an important detail there. When you whistled, this thing hid behind a tree. And I wonder if the Sasquatch do that, because I've had them whistle at me when I would show up on it like unexpectedly. One time I was coming back home, and I live in a forested area, and I never park at the top of the driveway. And I just like slammed on the brakes and got out of my vehicle because I was like, oh, I'm going to check on my trail cameras while I'm up here. And when I checked the trail camera, came back to my vehicle, I was standing there, and one whistled like a real sharp whistle, and then another one in front of me, and then another one to my right. So it's kind of like whatever it was in the woods triangulated around me. And
Hmm.
I think I threw them off because I always drive all the way through the woods to the parking lot where I live. Instead, this time I parked at the top of the driveway, and it's like a quarter mile till you get to the house. And it's like, I think it threw them off because I never just stopped there.
Sure. Yeah. And, you know, we've had a lot of encounters over the years hunting. We're not your typical hunters. We don't do the same thing all the time. We don't drive our trucks to our tree stands. We walk with the wind, no matter how long that might take. That might mean that a 300-yard walk took a mile and a half this day. So we're very erratic in how we enter our spots and get to our places. So I think that maybe contributes to all of the strange experiences I've had, because they're pretty numerous. So, and I can move on to the next one. So, uh, so in where was I next? So back in New York, about 2 years later, I actually had moved from Georgia to North Carolina, which is where I currently live. I'm a federal contractor. I work on Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Um, this was in New York. I would gone back up to New York to visit family during October. It was opening day of muzzleloader season, and we were hunting in the Adirondack Mountains. Um, I cannot remember the name of the. I think it's the Hudson Gorge wilderness area up there. So it's like everywhere else in the Adirondacks. It's just vast wilderness. There's nothing up there, with the exception of a few small towns. So we got up opening morning. I did not have a muzzleloader with me. I had my bow. Everybody else had their muzzleloaders. So everybody else walked out of camp. We were parked on the side of a mountain road, and we walked down the road, and I found a little draw that went up kind of into the mountains. And I said, oh, this is a good place as any. I'm not used to hunting this land. I've lived in the South since I was 18 years old. I don't know how to hunt the mountains. I'm used to hunting bottoms and pine thickets and that sort of thing. So I just started walking up the side of the mountain. And I got about 300 yards from the road, 400 yards from the road. And the hill leveled off, which was really cool, because I thought it was just going to be a kind of just a straight incline. But it got up the hill, and it leveled off into like a big flat swamp, right? So I'm standing on the edge of where it leveled off by a big tree, just kind of watching, and noticed it got real quiet, super quiet, to the point where I started getting freaked out. And again, I had no real knowledge of Sasquatch or anything, no intimate knowledge yet. So I didn't know what any of this meant. But it got really quiet. The hair stood up on the back of my neck for no particular reason, other than I was a little bit nervous just because I'm in the mountains and it's a new environment. So I was a little nervous for that reason, but no reason to be scared like I was. Just very terrified for no reason. So I'm standing there and I'm like, well, I'm not going to let this beat me. I'm just going to keep going. This is stupid. There's no reason to be afraid. So I took one more step away from this big tree, and a tree in front of me that I couldn't see, but it probably, I don't know, 80 to 100 yards, comes crashing down. And this was a very large tree. This wasn't a branch. This was a tree. I could hear it crack and snap and slam the ground. And again, this was on a day with no wind. It had not rained, so there was no real reason for trees to be falling. But that was my cue. The fear at that point kind of it climaxed, and I said, I'm out of here. So I turned tail and started walking back down the hill. The whole way down the hill, I don't know if it was just my nerves or what it was, but I thought I could hear, small branches and things breaking behind me as I'm walking down. And I'm thinking, well, maybe it was a bear. There's a lot of bears up there. So walked back down the hill, got to the road. As soon as I got to the road, I felt a little better, and walked the 400 or 500 yards back up the road, back to camp. Sat down, made some lunch, no big deal. Definitely kind of freaked out the whole day. And later that day, my uncle and a couple buddies that we were with decided to go back into town to get some stuff. We weren't going to hunt that afternoon. And this is when it really freaked me out. So as we're driving down the road, right where I came out, I had placed a little pink ribbon up in the tree so that my uncles would know where I went up in. And right there next to my ribbon, there's a small pine sapling, not very small at all. It was probably about 4 or 5 inches in diameter, is broken above my head, and I'm 6'2". So it's above my head, so probably 6.5 to 7 feet. It's snapped, and it's just leaned towards the road. Extremely fresh. Was not there when I was there. I didn't notice that for sure. And that really kind of creeped me out. As soon as I seen that, I said, "Whoa, okay." So there was actually something there, and there was something probably following me down the hill. Mm-hmm. And I didn't hunt the rest of the weekend. I just stayed around camp and chilled.
Yeah, it sounds like they were sending you a message and they were letting you know that they were watching you. And I do believe the creature that pushed down the tree is the same one that broke the sapling next to the ribbon. And I've had an experience like that. One time, this was years ago, before I even knew that Sasquatch existed, I set up a black chair in the woods next to this thick cedar tree, and I was just trying to, get some cover when I was rifle hunting. But I didn't see anything that day, and it's a spot where the deer usually cross up the driveway. And this is the same exact spot where I talked about earlier, where I got whistled at. Same exact area. But I didn't see anything that day. It got dark. I went home. There was no rain, no wind, no bad weather. I go back the next day, and that cedar tree, it's about, I would say like 6 to 8 inches in diameter, is snapped about 8 feet high. And it's so fresh that you can smell the cedar. And I mean, like, it just broke, and I had been sitting next to that cedar tree. So I just thought to myself, like, wow, that's weird. It didn't rain. There was no wind at all. Like, it was just a dead silent night. And I didn't know what it was. I kind of chuckled and said, maybe it was Bigfoot. But after that, I just kind of brushed it off and continued hunting. And that same spot years later ended up being where I had encounters at, where all kinds of stuff happened. But I feel like they're sending you a message, like they knew, like, hey, we were watching you sitting here hunting, and they were letting me know that they were watching me. But at the time, I was just like, what? How does a cedar tree just break like that?
Yeah, and then that was the curious part when I seen the tree, because everything else I could kind of play off. Well, a tree fell. I'm nervous. I'm walking back down the hill. Maybe I'm hearing things, whatever. But when I seen the tree that was broken, and just hours before it was not broken, and this is a pretty large tree, nothing I'm going to break or anyone else is going to break. That really got to me. Just because it was visual, evidence that I could see, and I really couldn't play off other than something broke it. I mean, it didn't break on its own. It's a healthy tree. There's nothing wrong with it. So yeah, so that's kind of New York, and that brings me kind of back to North Carolina. So, what happened in North Carolina actually happened a few times, kind of without me really understanding it, until a few years later. So I was on Lee Game Lands, which is in Lee County, North Carolina, not too far from Harnett County, where you've had some other folks on that have been talking about some encounters. So I'm hunting in a place that's inside of planted pines, about 8 foot tall, and it's a Y of hardwoods that's about 30 yards wide. It's a bottom that they actually left when they logged it. They're not allowed to log the creek bottoms. They have to stay so far off of the creeks when they log it. So you're left with these hardwood veins, and they make for really good hunting spots because they're great funnels. So it's the base of a Y. And seen a bunch of deer. This was late October. I'd hunted there all through the bow season. It's now muzzleloader season. I didn't have a muzzleloader still, so I still had my bow. I loved bow hunt, so I was always out with my bow. And I would blow on my grunt call. I had a little can call, one of the Primo's can calls that you flip over. And it's getting to that rut time. It's getting towards Halloween, so I would flip it over a couple times, and it would doe bleat. And something would come running off of the top of the hill down to the edge of the pines, really loud. like super loud, to the point where I got a little nervous, but then real excited because I thought, oh man, this is a big one. He's going to come out of the pines and I'm going to get a shot. And it would get to the edge of the pines, not far from me, maybe 20 yards. Cause again, this vein's only 30 yards wide. It'd get to the edge of the pines and then it would just pace up and down the pines. And the pacing was extremely odd sounding. It didn't sound like a deer. You know the sound of a deer, the 4 feet. You can hear all 4 hitting the ground. This did not sound like this. This sounded like me trying to be sneaky, but it's so close that I can hear it. I can hear twigs pop, and then a few feet later, I'll hear it down a little further, and it would pace for a couple of minutes, and then it would just go quiet, and then nothing. And then an hour later, I'd hit the can call again, trying to get that buck to come out because I'm still thinking it's a buck. And it would run back down to the edge of the pines and do the same thing. So that happened several times in that spot. And then what was very odd was I would sit in different places around this block of planted pines because it's about a 300-acre block of pines. And I wouldn't always sit in just that one spot. I'd sit in different places around it. And no matter where I sat, it did not matter. No matter where I sat, within a half hour of me getting settled into my tree stand, here comes that noise again. And a lot of times I didn't even have to blow on my grunt call or use the can call. I would just start hearing it. Very, very strange. Like there is someone walking in the pines, up, back and forth on the edge, trying, almost just pacing. And what was really strange about it is I actually, at some points in time, I had deer below me. I had a spike horn one night walk right under my stand. I had no intentions of shooting it. I was a mile and a half from the truck. And as this thing is walking around, I can hear it clear as day walking around. And there's a deer below me, and he's walking around. And he's completely unfazed by what's going on over by the pines, which is just really strange. I mean, just very odd. Like, almost like he didn't hear what I was hearing. Really, really strange. But yeah, so on that same piece of land, I was hunting up in the front one day. So day after Christmas, I decided I'm going to get out in the woods and take a break. I had been putting together Christmas toys for a day and I was exhausted. And sitting on the front side of this area, the pines are all rowed up. So here in the South, when a lot of times they'll take the pine trees and they'll row them up to create space in between the pines so the pines grow better. The ones that they leave, the ones that they log, they'll take the pulpwood. So you'll have these long rowed up, rows of pine trees. And I'm sitting in it, and up at the top of the hill, probably 150 yards, I hear this whacking on a tree. I'm like, man, that's really odd. Who's up there building something right now? And I would hear, whack, whack, whack. 30 seconds to go quiet, and then again, whack, whack. I was like, man, somebody's doing something up there, but there's public land. I don't know why anyone would be up there whacking on something. And that kind of stopped. And about an hour later, we're now about an hour before dark, I hear what I thought was, I almost was certain at the time, was another hunter walking up behind me. It's extremely thick behind me. So where they have all the rowed up roads, the pines that are left get extremely thick with holly trees and all kinds of other stuff, and you really can't even see them. So I really couldn't see behind me, but I thought for sure that another hunter was going to pop right out behind me because he was walking right up to me. And as he got 15 yards from me, 10 yards, really close, the walking got really quiet and got really sneaky and then just stopped. And at that point, I got really creeped out again. And I said, all right, I'm going to get down because I don't know what's over there. I don't know what's on the top of the hill hitting the tree, but I just feel really uneasy. I'm not enjoying myself. So I got down and left. So that's what happened on Lee Game Lands. I swore that place off. I hadn't been over there in years. My son wanted to go over there to scout for turkeys this year. So we went over, and I immediately found a sapling that's probably 3 or 4, a pine sapling, 3 or 4 inches around, and it's bent around and weaved into some other trees. and then another pine tree about 4 inches is stuck up through it with the butt end up in the air. And I looked at that, and I looked at my son, and I said, buddy, we're going to go look somewhere else. This land has always been creepy. Since the day I walked around on it the first time, it was creepy. I just didn't have anywhere else to go at the time. But it's always been creepy. So every time you would see a deer on that land, Miguel, it would always be running. That was always a strange thing. And I picked up on that years later when I started doing more research. You never seen a deer that was not running. It was always nervous. It was always moving. And deer, they're skittish, especially on public land. Certain times of year, they can be skittish. But opening day of bow season, all of a sudden you'd see deer just running through the woods randomly, like they're spooked. And it was just the oddness of that place kind of all. It was just a lot of little details that all kind of came together. And it was actually years later that I heard Kerry Arnold's encounter. And when he started talking about the can call and whatever it was that he had out there was running down through the pines, it was you ever seen Sherlock Holmes where he puts all the pieces of the puzzle together in his brain and he solves the mystery in like 2 seconds? Mm. That happened in my brain. Like 25 years of bow hunting, all of the strange little things that happened, the dots all connected, like all at once. Like, oh my God, that's what this has been this entire time. And I didn't know it. And it really threw me for a loop. I mean, I didn't hunt for a couple of years, really all that much, because it really bothered me, because all of a sudden you have the realization that you're not the only thing there. You're not the biggest, baddest thing in the woods, even though that's what you've been taught since you were a kid. Because that's kind of how us hunters are. We're kind of arrogant in that way. And it really threw me for a loop. But yeah.
Yeah, I can understand that. So once you heard other people's experiences and realized this is the same stuff that's been happening to me, it hit you hard that this was Bigfoot in the woods this whole time.
Yeah, absolutely. And, after that, I went up to a place called Butner Game Lands, which is an archery only piece. It's actually just north of Raleigh, which is a pretty populated area. But I found all kinds of strange tree structures up there. Heard a lot of weird noises, I thought I heard voices one day coming from the bottom that I couldn't really make out. I thought it was people walking around talking, but it was in a place where you really wouldn't be walking around hiking. It was really thick and nasty. My son and I, actually, this was a really strange event. I had totally forgotten about until now. We had walked into a little block of woods that was surrounded by pines again, and it was a little hardwood section, probably about 5 acres of standing white oaks that they left. And my son and I, he was young at the time. He was like 12. He was learning how to hunt, so he would hunt in the tree right next to me in his tree stand, and I would be in mine. We got up, seen some deer, had a good morning, whatever. But at this time, this is after the Lee Game Lands event, so I'm nervous still. I'm trying to get back out into the woods, trying to reclaim some of that. And we're walking back out about 10:30, 11 o'clock on the same trail that we had walked in on. Just a little trail I'd clipped through the pines. And we got out to where the little trail met a bigger four-wheeler trail. And right there in the trail is a rabbit with no head. Sounds really strange. But there was a rabbit with no head placed in the center of the trail that was not there 2 hours, 3 hours earlier when we walked in.
Wow.
I've been out in the woods for 30 years. I have never seen a rabbit with no head just randomly. Mm-hmm. That's really strange.
I found the same thing here when I was having the Bigfoot encounters. They put it right in the center of the road and the head was missing. I posted it online, but people are like, oh, that's an owl without a doubt. But it's like, no, you don't understand. I've been seeing Sasquatch out in the woods. Then I find this rabbit right in the middle of the trail. I feel like, again, they're sending me a message. And I think that's what they were doing with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's the rabbit, like you said, it might be maybe an owl. It wasn't picked off. It was twisted off. There was no head there. It was like if you took a marshmallow and you twisted it in half. That's really what it was like. But yeah, that really creeped me out. My son actually 2 days later, we were camping up in the area, he shot his first deer. I was at camp. I wasn't hunting that afternoon. I was just really spooked from the morning before and trying to keep this all to myself because I don't want to freak my son out because he loves hunting to this day. He doesn't even like to talk about this subject because he loves hunting so much. He doesn't want it to influence him, which I understand. I totally get it. But I was trying to keep this all to myself. So I was just like, hey, y'all go ahead. I'm going to, just hang around camp and make dinner and clean up and whatever. And so they all went out, and my son actually shot his first deer with the bow that evening. So I was like, he called me, and I said, oh, great. Well, I'll come help you track it. And on the way in, maybe 100 yards from where I found that headless rabbit a day or two before, I found the one and only print that I've ever found in the woods, the only track. Strange thing about this one, only had 3 toes. But they weren't they weren't dog-like or anything like that. It was very human-like, but only just 3 toes, 3 splayed toes, but one very clear footprint, bigger than mine. I wear a size 12 foot or 12 foot size 12 shoe, and bigger than mine by a few inches, but just one track where it like stepped out of the woods onto the logging road and then over the logging road. Couldn't see any tracks on either side, but just that one right in the center. I did not get a picture of it like an idiot, as again, I was with one of my uncles, and I didn't want to stop and draw attention to it, because I just, there's just they don't believe any of this, and I don't want to bring it up as kind of the wacko in camp, because I'm trying to kind of keep this all to myself still. But yeah, that was another very strange experience, and and I'm sure in between that there's been 100 other little small things, but and like I said, I don't have the most extreme stories compared to a lot of people, just a lot of small things that kind of all came together for me in a short period of time to when I kind of realized that there's something more to the woods than meets the eye. And I think there always has been. I think it's something that human beings have been dealing with since forever. I think over the last 100 years or so, we've gotten really arrogant in what we believe we know about the world because of our smartphones, and Google Maps has everything named. And as a hunter, you're taught that you're the biggest thing in the woods and nothing's going to bother you. And we're very arrogant about things that we don't really understand. And I've told my son, I was like, buddy, you don't know what's going on in our backyard at 3 a.m., much less in the middle of the Adirondacks, where you have 2 million acres of unbroken woods.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when people think of Bigfoot, they think it's highly unlikely. And, people think of New York and they think of tons of people. But if you look on a map, there is a ton of forest in New York. And I think Maine has the most forest in the lower 48. And I think it goes like Alaska, Maine, New Hampshire, West Virginia, and Vermont. Like they have the most forest out of any other states. So,
yeah.
A lot of people think of New York and they're like, oh, that can't be possible for Sasquatch to be there. But the truth is, if you zoom in on a map, it's just dense forest almost everywhere you look.
Exactly. And, here in the South, there's a lot of people that obviously live in the South, but this is timber country. From here to Louisiana is pine trees. The whole place is pine trees. And now they log it a lot and new pine trees grow up, but it acts like big woods. The South actually hunts kind of like big woods because of the acreage that you're dealing with a lot of times. And given that, there's a lot of places for things to hide. I mean, it's extremely thick. The South is thick. But then, I've found weird things in Missouri. I go to Missouri every year to hunt, and we go to Reform Conservation Area, which is it's in Callaway County, right, central Missouri. And I have found we came up onto this little knoll on top of a ridge, and we found probably 10 broken saplings. They weren't very big. They were probably only 1.5 inches, 2 inches around, but they varied from a couple feet off the ground to 4 or 5 feet off the ground to one that was almost 12 feet off the ground. And there's probably 10 or 12 of them just broken, just all snapped, like you would snap a pencil. And, Missouri is, where we were is a lot of just woodlots. It's not solid land. So it's really interesting where people see these things and where people have these encounters, because sometimes it's in dense forest and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's right in your backyard.
Absolutely. A lot of times it's like on farmland where there's a lot of woods, but at the same time, people, huge fields, cattle, things like that. And yeah, it's very interesting how these things can hide so well. And yeah, that county is not too far away from me. I guess that's like east of Columbia, close to the Missouri River. And I've been in that area before. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And the fact that you hunted in the Hudson Gorge wilderness area, that's impressive. Are you not afraid of getting lost in a woods that big?
So I was nervous for sure. I had a GPS with me. I made sure I brought my GPS. And I made sure before I left the main highway down where I had a little bit of self-service that my Google Maps was running, so that when I got up into an area with no cell service, I could still see where I was. So yes, I was nervous because I was like, well, if my phone dies or my GPS dies, I don't know where I am. Which is why all of that encounter in the Adirondacks didn't happen particularly far from a road. Now, when I say a road, this is a gravel mountain road that kind of just snakes up through the mountains. This is not a highway. This is just a little access road. But I did not get far off of it. I was only 400 or 500 yards total from it where this happened, and maybe only 1,000 yards from camp. And when I say camp, it was just a place where we pulled over on the side of the road. So, yeah, extremely remote area.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
And I find that these creatures are hanging out closer to parking lots, closer to people's properties than in the deep woods. And I think the reason behind that is they like to watch people, especially when they enter in their home, basically, and it's like they're keeping guard.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've had strange things happen right here at my house, and I live just north of Fort Bragg. There's people all around me. Now there are ways to get into some really thick woods that come right up to my house, some smaller woodlots. And what's really strange, Miguel, is I have these times where I leave this subject alone, and I don't really want to mess with it. And for whatever reason, I'm kind of drawn back to it, and I start researching it again, especially right before turkey season when I know I'm about to get back into the woods. I get back into the subject again. And every time it happens, I start researching it again, something weird happens. I had like an 8-month dry spell where I did not touch this subject. So I'm done with it. I don't know what this is. I don't care, whatever. And I got back into it for a couple nights. I was actually watching your show and some other shows, and I was upstairs brushing my teeth, and something smacked the side of my house hard. I never in my life have I ever had anything hit my house. There's no way that anything hit it. Like no one threw something at it. It was just, and this was 11 o'clock at night. I was upstairs getting ready to go to bed. Something smacked the side of the house. And then the next morning after that, my son comes in and says, "Dad, what's with this little rock?" And it's this little rock, a little smooth, polished stone. I have no idea. I've never seen it in my life. I have no idea where it came from. And it said honor on the back of it, the word honor on it. No idea what that means. And it's just placed in the center of my back deck. No idea. He's like, "Dad, what is this?" I said, buddy, I don't know. Just strange things. But I've been kind of prone to that throughout my life. I've had strange experiences, strange kind of, I don't want to say paranormal, but just things would happen in houses. And I'm very sensitive to that sort of stuff. I kind of feel that when I walk into a room, walk into a house, I can really feel what's kind of going on around the house. I can feel the tension coming off of people. I've always been really good at reading a room, but because of that, I have a hard time just turning that off. When I go in the woods, that kind of follows me. So I always stay really hyper aware. Most hunters are hyper aware, but I am really hyper aware. So
yeah, I know exactly
take that for what it is, but
I know exactly what you mean. And yeah, this subject does have a way of drawing you back in, and something slapping the side of the house, that does sound like Bigfoot activity. I've heard of Bigfoot encounters by Fort Bragg. I'm not sure if you live close to there. I know you work there, but yeah, I know these creatures are around the area. So It seems like there's some connection with you and the Sasquatch creatures, and I feel the same way about the activity myself. Do you feel like possibly there's a connection with you and these cryptid creatures? Because it sounds like you've had activity your entire life from the time that you were 7 years old and you saw that huge jet black figure all the way till now where you're having the house slap. So there's something definitely going on, and it does seem to be supernatural to me anyways. I mean, I find it unusual that some people have encounters their entire lives and multiple eye sightings and many experiences with these creatures, and the next guy has never seen or heard anything, and he's out in the woods all the
Mhm.
time as well. So what do you think about that? Do you feel like you're marked or tagged by these creatures? What are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot. I think certain people are maybe a little more, they talk about emotional IQ, how you can have a high emotional IQ, you have a lot of empathy, and you can put yourself in people's shoes. I have that. I've always been that way. Um, I think you can have the same thing on the spiritual end of things, where you're spiritually just a little more in tune than some other people. My younger brother, who has grown up hunting right alongside of me, he's 3 years younger than I am. Um, Very logical thinker. Um, Graduated UNC with math degrees and biology degrees. Very, very, on the rails type thinker. And he has not experienced a lot of the things that I've experienced in the same woods around the same time. And I can never figure out why. And it's like, well, maybe I'm just I'm not sure able to hear it, but just listening for it. Like there's a part of me that's more in tune with it than maybe some other people. And that's why you experience things on a more regular basis than some other people. And the fact that I've been a hunter I'm 38 and I've been doing it since I was 14. And I'm not a normal hunter. I haven't hunted as much the last handful of years. Um, as I've gotten older and these experiences have kind of curtailed my, as much as, the amount of time I'm in the woods. But when I was in my 20s, I hunted every day. I didn't have, I ran my own landscaping business so I could hunt every day. So between just being kind of spiritually in tune, I'm an avid, or I'm a devout Christian, have been my entire life. So that spiritual end of me is active. And then just being in the woods a lot, I think maybe you're just prone to it. And
Yeah.
once you have an experience and you learn some things, now you can't unsee it.
Mhm.
You can't put the genie back in the bottle, unfortunately, as much as I would like to. When you walk out into the woods, and I'm sure you're the same way, you see things. You see the trees that are broken at your head level for no particular reason, and none of the other ones are broken. Or you see the tree like I seen the other day that's weaved into the other ones, and it's just extremely strange, and it didn't grow that way. And then the butt end of another tree is shoved up through it. So you just see really strange things,
Mhm.
and
Absolutely.
I think that's just part of, you kind of took the red pill, so to speak, like in the Matrix, and that's the way it is.
If you really are marked or tagged by these creatures, one way to know is when you go in the woods, not every time, but every so often you'll have Bigfoot activity, which you are. Another thing is when you drive to random areas, let's say your uncle says, "Hey, let's go to Tim's house. He lives out there by such and such river. Let's go over there. We got to pick up some mail." And you go over there, and as you're driving to Tim's house, I'm just hypothetically speaking, um, on the way there, you'll see all these X structures on the side of the road and all these
Hmm.
arches. And it seems like when you randomly stop in forested areas, you'll see all these structures, almost like they knew that you were going to be there before you showed up. Have you had
Yeah.
that happen before?
Oh, 100%.
Mhm.
Every time I take a drive, I will see things that the other people in the car aren't seeing, or maybe just aren't paying attention to. But I can see the places on the side of the road where trees are broken, things are twisted, odd things that, just you spend enough time in the woods, you really get to know what looks normal. And then
Mhm.
when the abnormal things happen, they really pop out at you. But yes, I pick up on that stuff constantly
Yeah.
to an annoying point, actually, to the point where like I said, I wish you could just, men in black yourself and just blink and just erase your brain and go back to the way you used to be, where I just walked through the woods
Mhm.
without any fear or anything. And I just, hunted every day. But
Yeah, gives me chills just talking about that. And I guess another example is, let's say you find this new hunting area in the Hudson Gorge. You've never been there before, and you go and set up just because you've researched on a map, you looked on a trail that seems to be like an area that would have giant bucks, and you have the wind in your favor, and you strategically place yourself in this area. Well, when you go there, you experience wood knocks, and in that same area, there's tree structures everywhere, and it's almost like the structures find you. I don't know how to explain it, but yeah,
Mhm.
it seems like maybe you're like an empath, or there's people that say they're attracted to like autistic people. Maybe it's the Holy Spirit. God gives us discernment, and we're able to pick up on things way better than other people. Some people call themselves psychics, but I don't really fall into that. You know what I mean? But I
I,
feel
I
like
think
being a
it's all
psychic
I think
is,
it's all connected.
yeah, I feel like a psychic is just like the Holy Spirit, like it's discernment. And
Yeah.
I mean, depending on if you use that to guide your life for the better and the better of other people, or are you just doing readings on people and trying to predict the future? There's two different things going on there. But yeah,
Sure.
I know
Yeah.
exactly what you mean, where you can walk into a room and you can feel people's emotions and almost already know what they're going through, what they're thinking, what people are up to, whether it's good or bad. And yeah, it's definitely a strange thing. I feel like the
Mhm.
Sasquatch are connected to that, to those types of people, whether you're an empath, autistic, um, you have this divine discernment in situations. I don't know. I feel like they're able to gauge those type of people and approach them.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. I I think the same thing, just based off of a few years of researching this topic heavily. People who have routine encounters, they kind of seem to share similar characteristics, personality traits, and we all kind of seem to share a lot of that same stuff. Some people don't. Some people are just seem to be really just whatever, kind of normal Joes or whatever, and they just all of a sudden one of these things is standing in front of them. But it seems more often than not, when people have these habitual encounters every time they go out, this is kind of they're all the same type of people.
Yeah,
Maybe not.
absolutely.
I don't know.
No, I agree with you. And don't hold back here. Have you ever had a shadow person in your bedroom, or have you ever seen one before?
So I've never had a shadow person, never any sort of shadow. My brother did. My same brother, who's very sciencey, um, but a Christian at the same time. So he has a spiritual aspect, but he's just hit the way he thinks is more on the rails. He's a great mechanic, he is very good about that sort of thing. But he had a shadow in his room that actually attacked him when he was young, when he was about 13 or 14. He said it actually attacked him, and he was screaming. My father came in. My father's a pastor, and my father seen it and denounced it in Jesus' name, and it left. The room cleared. He said it literally just cleared. Um, I've never had that happen, but my brother did. And the weirdest thing I've ever had happen is I had a ball of this is. Let me try to explain this. My bedroom door was open. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. I could not sleep. I was watching Bob Ross on my phone, trying to relax and get to sleep. And I look on my door because it was open, like I said, and my hallway light was on, which is about 8 feet from the door. So the yellow light was casting on the door from where the light was on, right? Well, inside of that, right in the center of the door, I can see the light, but then another light showed up about the size of a basketball. And it was a brighter light than the hallway light. Not a lot brighter, not like a brilliant white light, but lighter than the hallway light. And it was moving, almost dancing in a figure 8 pattern on the door, like someone had a flashlight and they were shining it on the door. So I'm just staring at this thing, trying to figure out what's going on. My wife's sleeping. I don't dare wake her up because she would never sleep again. She'd be so terrified. So I let her be, and I'm staring at it. And I had no idea what this was. And initially, I thought it was somebody with a flashlight. Um, so I my 1911 was on my desk next to me. I grabbed it and threw around in the chamber. So, and this was the weird thing, Miguel, is as soon as the round went in the chamber and the slide shut, every light in the upstairs shut off. Like, oof. And now it's complete blackness. And now you can imagine now The hair is on. Now I'm freaked out. Full adrenaline dump. I jump up out of the bed, throw my light on, throw the hallway light on. My kids are all fast asleep in their rooms. Nobody else was in the house. Went and cleared the whole house. No one was there. Doors were all locked. Windows were all locked. That's one of the strangest, like, paranormal type experiences I've ever had happen. So
Yeah, that is
I have
terrifying.
no idea what that was.
Yeah, it seems like the supernatural beings can manipulate energy, technology, electricity, whether it's your cell phone, your computer, your TV, and it's strange how they can do that, but they can. I've had a lot of experiences in those regards, and it's definitely terrifying the fact that you racked one into the chamber and they shut the lights off. I don't know. That's spooky.
That was the spookiest part. It was almost like it was a movie. Like I'm telling you a story. That is 100% truthful. As soon as that round went in the chamber, the sound of the slide shutting shut the lights off. It's really freaky.
Yeah, that's a good example. When the paranormal stuff happens, it's almost like you're in a Hollywood horror movie, and it's strange. I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah, sure is. But yeah, I mean, that's I'm sure I could remember a bunch of other little things, but those are kind of the major events that have happened through my 25 years of hunting. And like I said, it's not as exciting as some other folks, but interesting nonetheless, because it's a lot of the same experiences. And that's really what threw me for a loop to begin with. But it's confirmation now is, hearing some of your things that you've experienced. And it's the same things that I've experienced, that same things that Carrie Arnold experienced, that Donnie Miller has experienced, and these other people who have had these wild encounters. None of us knew each other. We didn't know any of this information, but we're all telling the same story in different parts of our life.
Yeah, absolutely. So. And in the, I can't pronounce it, the Oceanee wildlife area, you said it was a Native American lands. Do you think there's a connection with the Native Americans and these cryptid creatures? Like maybe it's cursed or haunted, or?
I've thought that a lot of times. Because a lot of times you can walk onto land and it just feels weird. The land itself feels weird. I don't know what that is. Maybe it's events that have happened there in the past and it's just residual, and it's, I don't really know, but I think there's a connection between these things and that sort of energy sometimes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Just my personal opinion.
Yeah. And it just feels like there's eyeballs all over you, and you have like this, I don't know, like this static feeling. I don't know, like you're being watched. It's a strange feeling for sure. Almost like you walked into a portal, or you're just in another dimension, still in the same area, but just like something's off.
Sure. Yeah. And like I tell my daughter, she's had some weird things happen, and we live in the same house still. The other day she had a little trinket on her desk move by itself, and she came out and she's all freaked out. And I said, Gracie, we're spiritual beings living in a spiritual world. Weird things happen. Sometimes you just leave it at that, because you're not going to explain it any better than that. Sometimes just leave it at that. But I think the same thing goes for the woods. Just because it's the woods doesn't mean that spiritual things aren't there, and that events in the past didn't happen, and there's some residual effect left over. Maybe you just don't know.
Absolutely. It's one thing when things that defy logic are happening in the deep wilderness, but when they happen inside your home, your safe place, that's when, the alarm bell really goes off. It just defies logic. Science can't explain it. And I feel like it's spiritual warfare, and you can only pray. That's the best thing we can do. That's our best defense. And yeah,
I agree. That's all I ever do. I actually I've gotten angry at certain times, and told things to leave in Jesus' name, with authority, because this is my house. This is where I am. I do it in the woods sometimes. I don't know if that helps or hurts, but sometimes you just get fed up with it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the best thing you can do. It's not going to help you to call the cops or, yell at these things and try to get them to go away. You just got to pray your way out of it. And you saw this figure that you thought was your uncle, and then when you whistled, it hid behind a tree. That's spooky. How big was this figure? And when your uncle showed up in the opposite direction, did the figure seem a lot larger than your uncle?
So it definitely seemed larger than my uncle, given how far it was away from me. It wasn't right on top of me. It was, like I said, it was probably 80 yards, 100 yards down in the bottom. I think this was probably mid-November. I don't remember the exact date. Just one of the many thousands of times I've been in the woods hunting. But it was definitely larger than my uncle, much wider than my uncle. I said one of the things that kind of struck me is that when I first seen it was this thing is bulky. And my uncles are they're pretty big dudes, but not like this. This was a bulky, dark figure. I didn't see any color, which is one of the things that alarmed me right away. Is there's this guy's not wearing orange. My uncle had orange on. He had his hunter orange on. I said it's Georgia and it's rifle season, so you really need to take precautions. Whatever this was had no color about it at all, just dark, much bulkier than my uncle's. I don't remember it being super tall, but again, it's when you have no real frame of reference, you're not really thinking that way. It was just the way it was moving. It was, walking through the bottom, very smooth. Never heard it. Never made a noise, which was kind of strange. I kind of figured my uncle would make noise, tromps him through the woods. Hunters are not particularly quiet, especially at dark a lot of times when we're on our way out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But quiet, and once I whistled, just got behind this big pine tree. And it was a pretty big tree. That pine tree was probably the size of a fridge.
Yeah, I've gotten reports like that.
And disappeared.
Yeah, I gotten reports like that from hunters in Missouri where they see that same figure right when it gets dark, and I feel like the hunters are sneaking up on these things. They got the wind in their favor. They were really quiet when they got in their stand, and that's when you know you're being a good hunter, is when the Sasquatch have no idea you're there. And, they are physical creatures, but there is a supernatural side to them. But I feel like they're physical creatures from whatever dimension they come from. But, I mean, that's just theorizing, of course, but you definitely snuck up.
At the moment you witness them, it's very spiritual. Something's making noise. Something's walking around. Mm-hmm. Something's whacking a tree. Like I've never seen anything with my eyes that you couldn't say was a person or wasn't a person. The time when I was a kid, very strange, jet black figure. I couldn't definitively say yes, that was a Sasquatch. It was just extremely odd and scared me to death. And why did that memory stick in my brain 38 years later and nothing else has? The time is in Georgia when I seen that walking through the woods. Could it have been a guy? Sure, it could have been a guy. But just very odd experiences. And every time I would have an experience like this, Miguel, it sticks with you. Out of the thousands of times I've been in the woods, I don't remember most of the times I've hunted. It's been 30 years, since I was 8 years old when I first started getting out into the woods. I don't remember all the times I went into the woods. But those times when you have these things happen, they stick with you. And why is that sticking with you? Something about it made it stick with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a significant moment. And there's moments in our lives where we're able to remember them, our entire lives, whether you encountered a giant buck, you caught a huge fish, your first love, getting married, having your first child. And when you have these types of experiences, it's really significant and you never forget it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are times when I believe humans have revelations. When I was 15 years old, 14 years old, whenever I gave my life to Christ, I was in my bedroom on my knees praying, asking Jesus to enter into my life. I couldn't speak. As I was trying to speak, I could not speak. The words were trying to make them come out of my mouth. I could not speak. Something had a hold of me at that time when I was a young kid. And the words wouldn't come out. And I finally made the words come out. And at that point, I had a revelation like, all right, God is real. Jesus is real. And it morphs your whole life. I hadn't had another revelation like that until that Kerry Arnold experience. And I heard all of these things. And then, like I said, that Sherlock Holmes event happened and all of these dots connected. And that was another life-changing revelation. Like, all right, this is real. It always has been real. I didn't know it, but it's always been real. It's always been there.
Mm-hmm. When you know. What do you think these creatures are? Do you feel like it's the end of the world, like end times? Do you think it's just some relic hominid? Do you feel like they're the Nephilim? What do you think they are?
Yeah, I I think it's Nephilim related, but that could just be my Christianity speaking.
Well, I mean, they were
Outside of
giants.
that,
Yeah, they were giants. They had supernatural abilities, yet they were physical creatures. And the Nephilim created other animals on this planet, and I think that was the reason for the flood and why God had to have two animals, male and female, on the ark and Noah's family because he had to replace the human gene pool and or replenish it and the animal
yeah,
kingdom.
yeah. And I 100% do not believe that it's just a relic hominid or some sort of missing link that's walking around the woods. I 100% do not believe that. There's simply too many oddball things that happen with them. And to be honest with you, if it was just another animal, we'd have clear pictures of it. We'd have it captured or dead,
Yeah, it
like
would be
every
in the
other
zoo.
animal.
Yeah, it'd be in the zoo for sure. And I don't know. It's creepy to think about. Maybe the giants had descendants that weren't giants. Like maybe they bred with animals. And I kind of think back on Greek mythology. Like, man, was that just folklore, or was that the real deal? Like, was there animal human hybrids? And I always thought it was just folklore until I encountered the cryptid creatures and started learning more about it. And it's like, man, that sounds just like Greek mythology and other ancient cultures that had like these human animal creatures.
hmm Yeah, I don't discount really much of anything anymore. I think we've been mostly lied to most of our lives by authorities trying to keep kind of a thumb on people. They don't want you using your brain. They don't want you to believe what you're seeing, even though you're seeing it. They want you to believe what they're telling you.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And I mean, that's kind of your work environment. You do what you're told, and you know, you have to do it a certain way, and that's the
mhm,
society that we live in for a reason. I mean, everything's,
sure.
I don't know, not fabricated, but designed in a way that's pleasing to the authority figures.
Yeah. Yep. And I think shows like yours have, and Sasquatch Chronicles and some of the other ones where they have just normal people on a show and they talk about their experiences. That's really what set it off for me. That's what kind of drove the nail home, because growing up watching these shows on the Travel Channel and the History Channel, they would find Bubba Billy from the backwoods that had his scope duct taped to his 30-06, and this was your example of a Sasquatch believer. So they found the weirdest guy possible, and this was your example. But
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
last 10 years, you hear people from every walk of life, doctors, lawyers, pastors, engineers, carpenters, just regular people.
Mhm.
And they've all had these really strange experiences. So what do you do with that? You know?
Absolutely. And Wes from Sasquatch Chronicles is an awesome host. And that's kind of what drew me into the Bigfoot topic because he had these very sincere people on his show and you could hear the fear in their voice. And like you mentioned, Carrie Arnold from Bigfoot Odyssey, like you could tell that this encounter really affected him and he was out there turkey hunting and I think he lost like four family members, like all in a month, and he was out there trying to clear his mind, and he ran into this creature, and he described it kind of the same way as you, where it was shaking a tree, and of course the encounter was a little different, but it's the same activity happening to regular people out there in the woods, whether they're hunting, fishing, camping, whatever it may be, and it just goes to show
Yeah.
that this can happen to anyone.
Yeah. I've had basically everything happen that Carrie Arnold have had happen, other than I've never had one walk up on me to where I've seen it. And honestly, Miguel, part of the reason I don't hunt as much as I used to is I don't want that to happen. I
Hmm.
almost don't. I almost don't want to go out
Yeah, that's what's
thinking that
next.
is today the day. Is
Hmm.
today the day where I actually see one of these things and I'm like scarred for life.
Yeah, they're slowly revealing themselves to you, and I feel like that would be next is a Class A eyesight encounter, and maybe they're just trying to keep you out of the woods, or maybe they want you to know something else. And I don't know, I almost feel like God's revealing these things to us for a reason.
Yeah. So while we were talking about Oconee WMA, where I had quite a few other experiences, I kind of wanted to mention that I'm not the only one who had weird experiences in that area. I've hunted with my 5 uncles, my brother, several friends, 5 cousins. We all kind of hunt together as a family every year. And a couple of the guys have actually had encounters out there. Strange things happen. I'm kind of the only one who's come to grips with this. But so I had a friend of the family who was hunting with us, and he swore up and down that walking out of that same area where I had the encounter where that large man walked out of the pines, and I thought it was my uncle. He was followed out of the woods from that same spot all the way back to his truck, probably about a 600-yard walk. And he said whatever it was pacing him just on the inside of the tree line off the logging road. He could never see it, but he said it was clearly someone on 2 feet walking. My other cousins tried to just say that it was just a person. Maybe it was, but given the experiences I had out there, I kind of tend to believe that it wasn't just a person. Um, my buddy Matt, who I kind of grew up with down in Georgia, been a friend of the family for decades. He came out of the woods one night in November, years and years ago, and saying that he had been charged by a buck. And he said it was a buck. He said it ran right up to the edge of this thicket, bulldozing trees down, and sat there just breathing heavy on him and snorting at him, and very interesting behavior for a deer. Never heard of a deer doing that, and I honestly don't think that was a deer. I think that was one of these things, but he just doesn't really have that in his brain, so you automatically think deer because that's all you've got. But yeah, just a couple more little weird things that happened out at Oconee. I found multiple tree structures out there. I found one where it was broken over my head. It was a small dogwood, probably about 2 inches around. It was broken over my head, and it was actually tied almost in a knot. Like it wasn't just broken, but it was broken and twisted in a really it's actually kind of a cool looking formation right in this little funnel area by a beaver pond. So I found all sorts of things out there to support it, and it's just a strange area. So it's a weird feeling out there, but yeah, I kind of wanted to just mention that about Oconee. I wasn't the only one, but yeah. But so I've lived in North Carolina since 2013, and I'm an avid bass fisherman, and spend a lot of time on Jordan Lake, which is in Chatham County, North Carolina. Um, so that land's actually, or that lake's part of the flood control for the Haw River that feeds the Cape Fear River. And I know you've had some other guests on that have talked about experiences on the Cape Fear and the swamps that are on the Cape Fear. It's a wild place. Definitely a long history of encounters. But so Jordan Lake's in the Piedmont area of the state. That's kind of where the land gets really hilly in between the coastal plains and the Appalachian Mountains. So a lot of ravines, a lot of steep ridges, that sort of thing. Where down by the Cape Fear by the coast, it's just real flat and swampy. But anyways, so we were out fishing with my wife. This was probably 2016ish. So I was my wife and my brother. We were in a little 14-foot John boat at the time, and fishing down on the south end of the lake by Pose Ridge boat ramp. If anyone ever wants to look it up, by a place called $1 Million Island, and it's just a small island out in the lake. It's probably only, I don't know, 100 yards from the mainland shore, and we're bass fishing around this island. And right at dark, maybe 30, 45 minutes of solid light left, we're fishing at the island with our backs towards the mainland, and we hear this gigantic splash right behind us. A huge rock. I mean, we're talking the size of a basketball. It sounded like someone cannonballed out of a tree. Definitely wasn't a fish. I know what those sound like. I've been fishing my entire life. This was something that was thrown into the water, but extremely heavy, super loud splash. And we all turned at the same time, like, what was that? We seen the gigantic ripples where the rock had landed. Super confused, like, what did something fall out of the trees? What was going on? Sat there for a little bit, really kind of couldn't figure it out. So we just kind of went back to fishing, turned around, and it'd probably been 10 minutes. And same thing, another big rock hit right behind us. Turned, seen the splash, same thing. So my brother and I, we got kind of upset because this is public hunting land that surrounds the lake. So we were thinking, is someone messing with us? What's going on? So we got upset. We started yelling and put the motor on and went towards shore. And we were ready to confront whoever that was. Whatever it was, never made a peep, didn't make a sound, never walked off. I have no idea. It was just completely dead silent. We got up by the shore and we both kind of looked at each other and we're like, all right, it's a little creepy. So we turned around and we just kind of left the area. That same area, actually, my wife and I were in January timeframe of this year, and a couple of big hills in that area, right by the lake, and we heard very, very audible wood knocks from the top of the hill. It sounded like a ball bat going to a tree. I heard it, and my wife, I didn't really say anything. I was waiting to see if she heard it, and she heard it, and she looked right at me and said, "John, what is that?" And I said, I think you might know what that is. And she said, well, can we just leave here? Because I'm really uncomfortable, because it was loud, really close to us. And the noise really seemed kind of directed at us. If that kind of makes sense or not, I don't know. But so we left, got out of that area. See what else happened in that area. Oh, yeah. One of the stranger things happened in that area about 2 years ago. I was hunting with my son, my oldest son, Noah. He was 16 at the time, and this was Youth Rifle Day. So in North Carolina, they have a day during the bow season. It's usually right around the end of September. I think this was the 27th of September. And anyone under the age of 17 can legally take their rifle out, or any weapon that they want, and can hunt and harvest either a buck or a doe on that day, as long as they're with their with their guardian. So he was with me, and he was in a tree that was right next to me. We both climbed up in our tree stands about 8:30 in the morning. We had gotten up a little late, walked around for a little while, kind of did our thing, and we decided, well, let's sit for kind of the midday, see what happens. So we were sitting not far from the lake, not far from where all this other stuff had happened, in an area that they had just logged, thinned out all the pines, and there was a really, really nasty thicket that we were sitting up against, and this thicket covers an entire hillside, a really large area. And we were climbing up into our stands, and I had just gotten up into my climbing stand. I'm a lot faster at it, or I was at the time, getting up than my son was. He was kind of new. He'd only been hunting for a couple of years. It was one of the first times he had ever been out with his rifle. So he was really kind of nervous with his rifle and taking things really slow. We got told him to do. And so I got up and settled down, and I've got my bow, and he's still got his rifle on the ground on a rope. And he starts pulling it up, and as he gets it about halfway up the tree, I hear something come busting off that hill, super loud. And a big buck jumps out of the thicket. Really nice buck. Runs right in front of me and Noah. I, of course, have my bow. I can't do anything. Noah's gun's hanging in the air off of a rope, so he can't do anything. And it runs off right by us. And we're just looking at each other like, wow, did that really just happen? Well, whatever was chasing him, I heard behind that deer, and it stopped before it got out of the thicket. And the buck kept going, and this thing stopped. And it walked up and down this thicket about 50 yards from me for 30 to 45 seconds. This was the most clear, two-legged individual I have ever heard. Definitely on 2 feet. I mean, there was no doubt about it. I heard it. Noah heard it, and it just paced up and down this thicket, but would not come out. It somehow knew we were there. He smelt us, maybe seen us climbing up the trees. I don't really know, but it knew we were there because it would not come out. But it was hauling behind this deer, keeping up with the deer. This is a 4.5-year-old buck on a dead sprint, and this thing was right behind it, keeping up with it. And then just got to the edge of the thicket and locked it up. Just started walking up and down the edge of the thicket, and eventually kind of got tired of that, and I could hear it just mosey back on off the hill. Just really, really strange. And that's another place that I found all sorts of weird tree structures and things like that over the years, and heard some weird stuff out there, some weird whistles, and like it's another place where I've heard what sounds almost like someone talking in the woods. but you can't ever make it out. It's just like indistinguishable voices at a distance. Which, sometimes when you're in the woods, you hear that kind of stuff. There are houses around, they're kind of sporadic. So you never really think that much about it, especially in the woods when you're trying to kind of keep your cool. But I think it's all connected out in that area. So, but yeah, so that's about really all I wanted to add with those few things. I think help tie a few more things together. So.
All right, I appreciate that, John. And yeah, it sounds like your uncle was followed out of the area by Sasquatch and also your friend. I wouldn't think a buck would do that. And I had the same impression when I got followed out of a wilderness area after I got done bow hunting. And it was a long walk back. And that was my first thought, like, man, this is a giant buck that's paralleling me out of the woods. And every time I would stop, it would stop. And then I thought, maybe it's a black bear. Oh, man, maybe it's a huge male mountain lion. And it just seemed really intelligent, and I couldn't see what it was. But after listening to other people's experiences, that's what I figured out this possibly was, because I've had a Sasquatch encounter there in the past before. There's been a lot of sightings and experiences reported from the same area. So that's what I think it was. And I'm sure your friend just didn't have a place for it in his mind, and Bigfoot just didn't exist, but that's probably what it was. And yeah, the fact that something was throwing huge rocks in the water when you were fishing, I hear that over and over from people when they're fishing. And I think these things get territorial. You're seeking out their food sources, and maybe they want to occupy the area, but they have to wait for people that are fishing in the area. So they get a little impatient and territorial. And yeah, that's spooky. Did you see the rocks fly into the water?
So we never actually heard anything. That was kind of one of the weird things is we thought it might have been a branch at first, falling out of the trees. But number one, where it hit, we weren't anywhere close to any sort of trees. And we never heard anything come through the woods. We figured if it was something falling out of the trees, you would hear it hitting the branches. There's giant pine trees that line Jordan Lake. They're 100 feet tall. We never heard anything. It was just like all of a sudden a rock fell out of the sky. But I hear carp jump all the time. Fish jump out of the water. That's common. I've been a bass fisherman since I was 4 years old. I bass fish 5 times a week this time of year. You hear carp. They have a particular slap on top of the water. I can tell you what it is from across the lake. This was not that. And given all the things that have happened in that area, it's just a little too coincidental for me to just write that off.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think the wood knocks meant that you and your wife heard? You said that it seemed like they were directed towards you, and I got that impression too whenever I heard wood knocks in certain areas, and it just seems like they are directing those knocks towards you. Now, maybe they could be hunting, communicating with one another, but I feel like it's intentional.
Yeah. It just, with where we were coming up to the shore, we were fishing on the end of this point. And the hills on it, the hill kind of goes out. That sort of makes sense. It kind of stretches out. And as we got to this point, as soon as we got to a particular spot up near the shore where we were fishing, the knocks happened right at the top of the hill, maybe 100 yards or so. And the noise was it was just like a bodybuilder took a baseball bat and hit it up against a tree a few times. And it actually did it a couple of times. Yeah. And that's about it as far as my stories go.
Okay. Well, John, you did an excellent job at describing these experiences and these encounters that you had out in the forest. And it was definitely terrifying. It does make me feel like you're marked or tagged by these creatures. But yeah, don't let it ruin the forest for you. Definitely keep going out there and enjoy what God gave us, which is nature. And yeah, if you do have an encounter, just know that you are already onto them and you know that they exist.
Yeah, man, I appreciate the time. And, this has been therapeutic. I've talked with Donnie Miller and Kerry Arnold and some other folks over the years just to try and get this stuff off my chest. And this is no different. I appreciate the time.
Absolutely. And I hope it helped you out speaking with me. And if you ever have another encounter in the future, definitely reach back out to me. I want to see where this all goes, where it's all heading to. And yeah, I'm just curious to see if more unfolds in the future, which I'm sure there will be.
I'm sure. Seems like every year something new happens.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, John. Well, I got to let you go for now. And until the next one, you take care, my friend.
Sounds good. You too.
All right. See you later. All right, John, thank you very much for sharing your Bigfoot encounters and experiences, ranging all the way from New York all the way down into Georgia. And these types of experiences and encounters I find to be the most reliable and genuine. These are the most authentic ones. I mean, I'll just be honest about that, just because I'm an outdoorsman and I love to hunt, and I feel like these encounters really hit home because hunters are out there in the woods and they're observing their environment, their surroundings, and they know exactly what to look for. And if something's off, us hunters, we pick up on it. Especially when you see something that stands out like a jet black bipedal figure. And I mean, this would stick out to anyone, but when you're out there in the woods staring at the same trees over and over, you know what to look for, especially when you see deer after deer, you see squirrels, turkeys, birds. When you have this type of experience of like something paralleling you out in the woods, it's just not normal. You're out there all day and you kind of acclimate to the environment around you. So you know when something's off, because even like the smallest stick breaking or something moving in the leaves really gets your attention. And I feel like most people just hiking through the woods or camping don't really pick up on stuff like that. I mean, some people do, but for the majority of people, they're not really tuned into that, especially when they're out there with others. People are talking loud, playing music. And yeah, I mean, this experience that he had in the Hudson Gorge wilderness area, that was frightening because it really reminded me of my encounters that I had here in Missouri, and it just really hit home with me. But yeah, John, I appreciate you so much, and I also appreciate the listeners and everyone's support. If you have a Bigfoot encounter that you would like to share with me, please get in touch with me sometime at sasquatchtheory@outlook.com. And it doesn't have to just be Bigfoot. If you encounter Dogman, Mothman, whatever it may be, I would like to hear about it because I do research out in the forest, and I want to be aware of everything just in case I run into it. I've seen a lot of strange things, so I'm very open-minded. But yeah, thank you everyone for listening, and until the next one, you guys be safe out in the forest.